What's going on? It's Fight Season MMA, and today I want to do my breakdown of the UFC Abu Dhabi card on ABC, headlined by Cory Sandhagan versus Umar Nurmagomedov. So there are some notable names other than these two fighters like Chito Vera, Deiveson Figueiredo, Tony Ferguson, and more. So I want to just break down some of these fights and give my predictions going into this weekend's card in Abu Dhabi. Thank you guys so much for watching Fight Season MMA, and 97.2% of my viewers are not subscribed. So please go hit that subscribe button. It is the best way to show support to the channel and truly show how much you enjoy the UFC content. If you guys always want to be updated with the most recent news, subscribe to the channel and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss anything. Let's jump right into the UFC Abu Dhabi on ABC breakdown. Sandhagan versus Nurmagomedov. The first fight I want to talk about is Tony Ferguson versus Michael Chiesa, and I genuinely think this is where Tony Ferguson starts to break the streak of his losses. He's lost to Beneil Dariush, Bobby Green, Paddy Pimblett, and a lot more other good fighters like Justin Gaethje, but I think that this is the fight to where Tony Ferguson breaks the 7-loss streak in a row versus Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa is also an older fighter, and he fought Kevin Holland at UFC 291 as the opener to the main card, and he genuinely looked like a very odd fighter on that card. And I mean, all of his reactions were in a super odd way, which was a very interesting way. Kevin Holland's a very good fighter, but just some of the reactions Michael Chiesa was throwing out there were just genuinely confusing in that fight. And I do think that this is a fight where Tony Ferguson can ultimately get the win. I would not bet on this fight. This fight has too many question marks, knowing how bad Tony Ferguson's been and of how bad Michael Chiesa has been, but genuinely, I think my prediction is going to be Tony Ferguson getting the win at UFC Abu Dhabi this weekend again over Michael Chiesa. And truly, I just think that Tony Ferguson's experience and just still hunger to get one win inside the UFC is going to carry him to ultimately get the job done. The next fight I want to talk about is Chito Vera versus Deiveson Figueiredo, and this is genuinely one of the best fights to make in the UFC bantamweight division. Chito Vera just came off a title shot against Sean O'Malley where he got absolutely dominated over 5 rounds. 2 judges had it 50-45, and 1 judge had it 50-44. But truly, Chito Vera is a very good fighter inside the UFC. He has a lot of power going inside the UFC octagon, and fighting someone like Deiveson Figueiredo, who is the former UFC flyweight champion and is on a 2-win streak in the UFC bantamweight division, has fireworks written all over it. This is a fight I genuinely would not bet on because of how good these two are against one another. Chito Vera has a lot of power, like I was talking about earlier, as well as Deiveson Figueiredo, but I think that Deiveson Figueiredo's grappling style inside the UFC is going to really give Chito Vera problems because of how he's able to mix up the department. Chito Vera is a very one-dimensional fighter, which can get you some wins like he did over Dominic Cruz and Rob Font and people like that, but genuinely, Chito Vera is going to have to go in there and just more diversify his game to beat Deiveson Figueiredo. And if he does not, I just don't see a way that he truly wins. Deiveson Figueiredo has great jiu-jitsu, great wrestling, and has some of the greatest power inside the UFC. And since he's not cutting as much weight back down to flyweight and now he's at bantamweight, his chin is a lot better in the UFC too. And I just think that Chito Vera is going to have a lot of problems locating Deiveson Figueiredo because of how elusive and of how small he is for this UFC bantamweight division. Ultimately, I have Deiveson Figueiredo by decision in this fight. I think that Figueiredo is going to go in there and show that there's levels inside the UFC in this bantamweight division, and I think that he is one of the next title challengers for the UFC bantamweight title. With this fight and one more fight, I think that he can go in there and truly challenge for the UFC bantamweight title. In the co-main event, it is Shara Magomedov versus Michelle Alexiachuk, and after the Nick Diaz versus Vicente Luque fight fall off, they made this fight on about 2 to 3 weeks notice, and I think Shara Bullett's going to go in there and get the win. Michelle Alexiachuk just fought at UFC 302 against Kevin Holland, where he got submitted in an absolutely disgusting armbar by Kevin Holland, which he overextended by, and everyone thought his arm was broken, and considering that he's fighting this soon again, his arm was definitely not broken. Shara Bullett fought Andre Cherkoli at UFC Saudi Arabia this year, and he put on a very good comeback performance after losing those first rounds. I think Shara Bullett's going to go in there and get the win. This is not a fight that I would really go in there and bet on, just because of how good these two fighters can be. Michelle Alexiachuk is someone who swings for the fences, and he's going to go in there and I think try to beat Charlotte Bullet in very dominant fashion. I see this fight being a knockout either way, no matter who the fighter is who wins, but I do have Shara Bullet winning this fight and staying undefeated. And the main event, Cory Sandhagan versus Umar Nurmagomedov. First off, I want to start off by prefacing saying that I would not bet on this fight. This card is not a fight to bet. This card to bet on. There's a lot of close fights on here and a lot of fights that could go either way. And this is the prime example of that. We have the number one contender, in my opinion, Cory Sandhagan, inside the UFC bantamweight division, fighting one of the best up-and-coming prospects the UFC has ever seen in Umar Nurmagomedov. Umar is currently number 10 ranked in the UFC bantamweight division, but the only reason he's that low is because he hasn't had adequate competition to really go in there and fight. And this is a massive step up in competition for Umar compared to a lot of his other fighters in Cory Sandhagan. Cory Sandhagan is one of the most intelligent fighters inside the UFC, and I truly think that he's going to put that on display against Umar Nurmagomedov. You might think that since Umar comes from this Dagestani camp, that he's just a straight power grappler and ground and pound guy like Khabib or Islam or a submission threat. But Umar is a very good striker inside the UFC, and he can definitely put that on display against someone like Cory Sandhagan. But I do think that this is going to be a very bloody fight. I think this is going to be a very hard-fought fight for each of these two fighters, and I do think that Cory Sandhagan is going to come up here and prove all the doubters wrong and get the win. Cory Sandhagan is such a good bantamweight that I think that truly in every single facet of his game, he is absolutely perfect. I know he's had losses to Peter Yan and people like that, but Cory Sandhagan has improved so much and has ripped off 3 straight wins against Song Yadong, Chito Vera, and Rob Font inside this bantamweight division. And I think with a win over Umar Nurmagomedov, he is going to get a title shot against Sean O'Malley or Merab Dvalishvili. But I can 100% see Umar winning this fight, being the technical striker and grappler he is, taking down Sandhagan, striking with him, which will be a very fun fight. Umar definitely has some of the hardest styles to combat inside the UFC, but if anyone can do it, it's Sandhagan, someone who processes so fast, someone who's so good in that department, and someone who is genuinely one of the highest IQ'd fighters inside the UFC. And I think that this fight is going to give Umar Nurmagomedov a lot more problems than he truly thinks with the unconventional styles of the flying knees, the wheel kicks, and all this different type of stuff. This is a challenge that is one of the hardest fighters inside the UFC to deal with, and I genuinely think Cory Sandhagan is going to go out here and win this fight in dominant fashion. I have Cory Sandhagan by second or third round knockout, and I think that Cory Sandhagan is going to go back and revert to his old ways. I still would not bet this fight, but I'm betting on Cory Sandhagan putting on a very dominant performance to request his title shot. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please leave your comment down below talking about who you think is going to win these fights. Like I said, please do not bet on this card. This is a very good, very hard card to really predict. There's a lot of close fights and a lot of very exciting fights going into this main card. Truly, I think that Cory Sandhagan versus Umar Nurmagomedov could be fight of the year. You got Chito Vera versus Davis Figueiredo, which is going to be an absolutely technical match. Tony Ferguson is fight. It's Tony Ferguson fight week, which we all love watching the boat fight. And truly, there is some really, really, really fun fights on this card, and I would 100% tune in to the early start time of the main card at 3 p.m. Eastern time in the United States of America. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated with the latest MMA news and content. Subscribing is the best way to show support to the channel, and since we're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, please hit that subscribe button. It 100% does a lot when you do so. Even one subscriber does a lot for the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and I will catch you guys soon with more UFC content and news.